And we are live. Hello, fellas. I'm going to be watching a video today with Buckley again. We were going to have Hassan too, but he's feeling a bit under the weather, so he's not going to come on. And we are discussing a video with a psychology professor who specializes in narcissism. Do you want to give an introduction, Buckley? Because you did a bit of digging.
Right. So this man. His name is Sam Vaknin. He is an Israeli writer and professor of psychology who has also, interestingly enough, done some work into um, physics. Apparently, strange. Um, anyway, he he is most well known in the media. He's considered to be an expert in narcissism and psychopathy. He constantly is going on shows like Channel 4, Vice, uh, and other areas. He's been in more than a few documentaries. So this isn't exactly a crank. He is not. He is like this credentialed academic type, and he's on here on his YouTube channel here, claiming that this is the worst time in human history to be in.
Yeah, he's got... Like, I'm going to say it right now, guys. He's got some kind of silly takes. In fact, I think profoundly silly takes. We're going to tear into him for his ideas, but I'm telling you, if you insult the guy in the chat, I will... I will delete the message, and if you persist, I'll block you, because I'm not about to provide an occasion of sin to you people. Control yourselves. But, yeah, okay. Let's get started with the fella. He makes his case pretty quickly. So, okay, let's go.
This is by far the worst time in modern human history. But wait a minute, Vaknin, you say. What about the Black Death in the 14th century? What about the Second World War and the First World War last century? Weren't these periods much worse than today? No, they were not. And the reason they were not is because institutions were intact. The individual...
I'm sorry, but, I'm finding it really strange. Like, I doubt he's actually saying this. How could he say that the Second World War was better than today as a Jew, of all people?
Okay, yeah.
What institutions did they have to go to in I'm not being funny, but what? Yeah,
I'm just kind of. I mean, the institutions we have right now are more the social fabric. Back then was more stable than it is now, but it's not like it's just coming apart and we're all becoming totally atomized yet, right? We are still ways off from this kind of worst case scenario. He is being hyperbolic here, honestly.
Yeah, what I would say as well is it's a question of where. He means West. He means the West when he says this. He talks about Western civilization, but then again, he also talks in certain places about the entire world, right? So, this feels like low-hanging fruit, Thexan says. I don't think it is, because he gets into some interesting reasons that are worth discussing. It's he's got some interesting takes. I'll say that it was something that struck me as worth responding to, and to be honest, it struck me as worse the second time I watched this. This is the third time I'm watching it. How many times have you watched it, Buckley?
I just watched it once.
Yeah,
I just watched it only once because it's. I only needed to watch it once, honestly, because he was very clear about what his views were.
Yeah, I gave it two looks. Like, one time it was on 2 times the speed, so, might have missed stuff. But yeah, we'll continue. Because he has some interesting reasoning for it. Yeah, obviously he's just said about the institutions being destroyed. I don't think that's true. But let's continue on.
Had suffered. Families broke apart. People died. But there was always someone and somewhere to turn to. There was a family. There was a community. There was a village. There was the church. There was the monarchy. There was the feudal lord. There was always an address. The buck.
And there is still the church. It's not as present in the society, but you can still go to church and you can still get these things. I don't know. Does he think that? Obviously, he doesn't think the churches have just disappeared, but they are still support networks. There's an elderly lady up the road actually in our church who had a stroke a few weeks ago, and the entire community is talking about her. It's like, oh, is she all right? Pray for her, by the way. So to say there is no support network is nonsense. Maybe for a secular person, as I suspect this fellow is, because he has some rather hot takes on religion which don't marry up with reality. But yeah, let's continue. Buckley, do you have any comment?
I would just say that when he's talking about this is the thing, right? We can all see the writing on the wall that says that what he's talking about is the breakdown in social trust. People aren't getting out anymore. People don't trust each other anymore. And this is a common theme throughout all of what he's talking about. A kind of clear line. People just aren't trusting each other. They're not getting out. They're not forming these kinds of manor buns, these little smaller societies. There's not a sense of community. And I think this mostly affects urban areas, very secular places. And I think it's very keenly felt in certain parts of America, like particularly on the West Coast. You get this sense that people are just so isolated and alone, and there's nobody to turn to.
I get that sense in Britain as well. It feels like the family is getting smaller and smaller. Like, for those who don't know, my grandfather died yesterday, and it feels like everything's getting smaller and smaller. But at the same time, it's not as atomized as I don't have a church and a community to go to. You can still go to them around here, even out in the sticks.
Right. I think right here, he's sort of reflecting the kind of the general feeling you get from a lot of progressives and a lot of secular people who are in these urban areas, and they feel isolated and they're very online.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, a lot of this, I feel like it's a very substantial section of the population that says this. And to be honest, he seems like the kind of person who would be in that milieu, considering he has a very, I want to say 20th century attitude towards history and towards religion. So it's no surprise. I mean, this is one of the things that I kind of took away from this. Like, this guy doesn't even realize that the way that he's thinking is a large part of the reason why these people even exist. Like, he's going to complain about various social structures, and it'll be like, well, what caused that? It was to a large extent the ideas in your head, right? Like, I'm not going to say he did it to himself, right? But it's, this sort of rationalism that he goes into in a bit. It's people have a religious. Actually, I'm just going to leave it to it. Do you want to continue, Buckley?
Yes.
Yeah.
Stopped somewhere. Today, there are no institutions. Everything fell apart. Societies are anomic. They have no norms. Everything malfunctions. But in addition to that, this day and age we live in.
Do you want me to speed it up a little bit, Buckley? He's talking pretty slow. About 1.5.
I guess one and a half. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
has a few attributes, the likes of which had never been seen in human history. This is not
Which one's
only
it?
the worst period in modern history, this is an unprecedented time and era throughout human history. We are so
I don't know. I don't know where he's timing modern history from. I'm gonna assume, for the sake of argument, 1517. I don't think that's true. I think it would be much worse to be living in Germany in the midst of the 30 Years' War. I think it would be much worse to be living in Europe generally during the Second World War. I think it would be horrible to be living in 19th century industrial cities. You know, does he think that the socialists and the communists came from nowhere?
I think a lot of these. Yeah, I think he, like I said again, I think he would say that, oh, at least those people had families and churches to fall back on when these political forces came for them.
Well, did they?
But
I don't think they did. Like, a huge proportion of the women in industrial cities were prostitutes. These aren't exactly necessarily women with the greatest. You know, there's a lot of despair in these sorts of women. You know, there's a lot of disintegration in these places. You know, cities for a very long time were a place with a net death rate because people wouldn't have children in cities. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if alienation. I think these people may have had family back on the farm, but it was a lot harder to access them now. Like, if you are a rural person moving to a city now, I don't think you could be living in a better time, because you can just, you know, call up and FaceTime your mum on the family farm. You couldn't do that in 1850. Instead, you'd live in neighborhoods where people caught cholera a lot and died. You would live with, like, I mean, I'm thinking specifically of London here. You know, there was even a time, I think it was in the 19th century or early 20th century, where there was the Great Stink, where one summer I think it was one summer, or like some point, the climactic conditions changed so much as to make the smell of the Thames, or at least the smell of the city, become horrible. It's called the Great Stink. We don't have that now. There's been a recovery in the wildlife living in the Thames. It's not like the Ganges in India right now.
yeah, I mean, we do have serious problems right now, but I don't think. Again, we do have serious problems right now, and a lot of what he says are are serious problems, but I think calling it like this dystopia or the most horrible time in all of human history is, well, it's hyperbolic in a lot of ways, and
In the extreme,
I think
you know,
to the extreme. It's only You can only say that right now is the most horrible time in human history if by the by I guess post World War II standards, perhaps. It's
and
it,
even
it's
then, like, okay, you know, I feel like we could discuss this at massive length, but I think that it would be better if we spread it out across when the guy makes the adequate points, because I agree there's an argument to be made that we live in perhaps one of the most socially isolated times in human history, but that, you know, I think that there are other things that sort of balance things out. Like, almost nobody starves to death nowadays in the West.
true. All right, let's continue, I guess.
Yeah.
lost and disoriented and dislocated and confused and paranoid because this is an uncharted territory. This is terra incognita. We've never been here before. We've never been here before with regards to each and every one of these trends, and we definitely have never been here before with a conflict.
No, there is nothing new under the sun. We still have ancient wisdom that we can rely on that worked for thousands of years. This feels like something that like the kind of quasi-villain in a Disney movie would say, but seriously, right? We have tradition still there, and it's still largely applicable. It's just that we've forgotten it. If people had meaning in their lives from, you know, the scriptures and from Christ, right? There would be no reason to despair. They might still feel the effects, of course we all do, but, you know, it would be a much nicer time.
Influence of these cataclysmic tectonic trends.
By the way, this fellow isn't religious, and he doesn't understand theology as well. Just, like, I don't think he's ever going to watch this stream, but, you know, if he is, he should reread the cosmological argument and remember that it's not a case of, like, you know, father and son, grandfather. It's like, well, what caused the first cause? It's like, my arms constitute my body, constitute part of what's me. It, like, goes down. Like, you can't... There is going to have to be a first cause in that case, but that's just me chipping this on in case he actually watches it, which I really doubt.
So, individuals can be forgiven for falling apart. Mental illness is on the rise, skyrocketing. Only this year, alone, 2021, the rate of depression, clinical major depression, had increased by 25%, single year. Pandemics, wars, aggression, murder, mayhem, crime, corruption, they've always been.
What is he talking about? We've got a minor war between Ukraine and Russia right now.
Well, no, let him finish his thought.
Yeah.
Because he's saying...
They're part of human nature. They're an integral determinant and dimension of our identity. They're not going away. They're not going to go away. They're here forever. They're here to stay. But never before had we reacted to these facts of life the way we are doing today. And it is actually the sum of our reactions that had created this dystopia, this nightmarish, surrealistic world that we live in. And I want to use this opportunity, your patience and my time, to touch upon a few of the unprecedented attributes, hitherto unheard of today's day and age.
I think he's completely false in this, by the way. Like, and we're going to show him why. Maybe, I can't speak for psychological theory, but I've seen similar problems described by medieval theologians. Right, like, I don't know what he's talking about.
Well,
it's
it's...
And it...
Can I... Yeah, so, if in case you couldn't catch... the audience couldn't catch that, his entire thesis is essentially the reason why, right now, the modern day, right now, today, is the worst time to live in all of human history, is because while we've always had war and corruption and crime and etc., we've never reacted to these negative things in the way we are doing now. And it shows in his mind that that Western man is uniquely psychologically weak at this particular moment.
And I mean, I think he's not wrong. I mean, I don't think he's wrong in saying that the West is psychologically weak, but the idea that this is unprecedented is hilarious to me. I can't believe that someone would actually say that. You'd have to be... Okay, you know, I'm not gonna go into the guy too much. I'll just continue playing.
We can point to different points in history where there have been collapses in social relations towards the end, towards the twilight years of a civilization. That's...
You know, yeah. Like I remember once I was coming home from church. And on the road back, one of the roads back from the church, my grandpa's house was, and he was out tending his garden once. And I went up to him and started talking to him, and it came up somehow in the conversation. He said, you know, we had this, like he had a newspaper or a magazine or something, and he read the top of the article, and it said, you know, children are rebelling against their parents, you know, they're throwing out the old ways and bringing in the new. And this was read in, like, you know, sometime in the 20th century, right? And he says, the year 2100 BC. So just before the birth of Abraham. So these sorts of, you know, throwings away of tradition, these things aren't new. They really aren't. And I mean, the Bronze Age collapse, I mean, that's another one as well. Like, I can see an argument that would say that the thing that we're facing now is potentially going to be of the same level as the Bronze Age collapse with the added bonus of nuclear weapons. But I can't see it exceeding that, unless we literally glass the planet. You want to continue?
Yes.
Okay, let's go.
Keeps shocking every single day for decades now, last 100 years at least. First of all, this is the age of splitting. This is the age of black versus white thinking. Everyone is 100% right or 1000% wrong. There's nothing in between. There are no subtleties. There are no nuances. There's no gray. No one is judged as the complex, compounded beings that we are. The world is perceived as a morality play of angels versus demons, evil fighting good. And we, of course, are always on the side of angels.
I can see this point as kind of like a caricature of a certain view from universities, but is this true for the majority of people? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, we're talking about if he's talking about rising political polarization in Western countries, then he does have a point there in that compared to, say, the mid 20th century, we are experiencing these huge spikes in political polarization. Both parties are becoming in America. Both the conservative Republican Party and the liberal Democrat Party are really coming apart in terms of ideology. And it's mostly being driven by the left wing side. Although the right wing side, do see some increasing radicalization over time too. I think I think it's because of the end of the sort of post-war peace that came after the Cold War. We have I don't think it's unsurprising that after the Cold War, after this threat of nuclear annihilation stops hanging over our head and we become the world hegemon, you start to see increasing political polarization within Western countries. Because there's nothing uniting us. There's no external enemy that is strong enough to unite us against them. And I think now, is this unprecedented throughout human history? No, because there have been civil wars before. We are not in a hot civil war yet. So this kind of atomization, where he's talking about black and white thinking, polarization, where the other side is considered to be 100% evil and we're considered 100% good. That kind of polarization happens all the time in civil wars, especially when it's sort of interreligious warfare between, say, Protestant and Catholic, or Muslim versus Christian. That kind of warfare occurs during times of political instability. So what do you think, Elliot?
I mean, to be honest, right? All human beings seek the good, all of them. But I think that the distinction between the left and the right, or the progressive and the socially conservative, is the ranking of these goods. And to be honest, I think that a lot of sides in this have gone completely bananas. Right? I don't know to what extent the right radicalized or who radicalized who. I've got a feeling it's probably the left radicalizing the right. But there's it's evil to hate the other side, but it's understandable. And I'm not justifying it here. Like, stop hating the left as hard as it is. Like, hate their sins, not the sinner. But yeah, I don't know why he would consider this to be like unprecedented. I mean, in Spain in the 1930s, you had leftists shooting statues of Jesus and killing nuns. We're not at that point yet.
No, we're not. That's what
not
kind
even
of.
close. Well, not
I
even
mean,
close. Maybe close. I don't know. That's kind of debatable. But I don't know what this guy thinks. I've heard stories from Bosnia in the 1990s where soldiers were throwing babies into ovens, cooking them, and forcing the parents to eat the baby. Right? We aren't on that level. Let's be honest. Like, to say, oh, we're unprecedented because, like, a bunch of leftists are screaming about conservatives oppressing them or capitalism or something, and, you have white nationalists, going on about the Great Replacement or whatever. Like, I'm sorry, but, the atrocities of the Second World War, the mass murder of, of various ethnic groups during the Second World War, and the sort of brutal treatment that you see after the war in various places, it just doesn't compare to the current political discourse in the West. I'm sorry. Like,
No, it does. It's such a. Hold on. Yeah, you can continue. I just need to mute myself so that the dog doesn't interrupt.
Yeah. I don't really have anything else to say. I just find it a little bit ridiculous. Like, I'm sorry, it's a sin to cries to heaven for vengeance, and it's a particularly egregious version of that to, like, take the baby and throw it into the oven and then force feed the parents that, right? We don't have that in the West yet, really. We have, like, odd psychopaths who do that. In civil wars, that happens, and we're not there yet. And these civil wars happen, like, they're not infrequent. It's not like we're somehow unique in that way. I think it's kind of silly. Do you want to continue, Buckley?
Yes.
I guess he's away. Oh, okay. I'm just going to read this out. You're absolutely right, it's not that bad, but I think it's going to get very, very bad quickly, and a lot of people will be caught clueless. I agree with that. This is something that's actually... This doesn't bother me so much now, but I remember a few years ago being very bothered by the fact that I thought... that the Boogaloo was going to happen, right? Like, like a civil war. And to be honest, I kind of have a feeling that COVID was that Boogaloo, but it may even be worse than what I thought now, but I'm a lot more at peace with it. But still, let's continue.
Public intellectuals, experts, real and fake, gurus, coaches, they thrive on this splitting. They sacrifice their intellectual integrity for the sake of dumb popularity and a lot of cash. Splitting is an industry. Splitting is an infantile psychological defense mechanism.
Splitting is like so what does he think's infantile specifically? What, like dividing from people because they disagree with us?
Well, I think what he's talking about is, okay, he's condemning right here this kind of Manichaean thinking, which is very different from the kind of moral religious absolutism you would see in Christianity. Because in Christianity, you have the idea of hate the sin, love the sinner. We see the sinner as a person who might do evil, but the person, and we hate him only insofar as he's doing evil. But insofar as he is a person, we are supposed to love him. And while we do see the world as being we see the world and the flesh and the devil as being sources of sin, we don't see we don't divide the division between good and evil is not between different sides of a conflict, but always across the human heart.
Yeah, we have to understand. I think in this guy would say in response, what about inquisitions? What about witch burnings? What about excommunication? Like, why does this not fall into that thinking that he describes?
Well, that's not really because those things didn't, like, we can talk about it. We can talk about first off, does he think that if you imprison a criminal or this is a guy who literally thinks that narcissists cannot be cured at all. Like, you cannot cure a narcissist. So, given that, do you think he should be talking about um, how to about if you have someone in in a community who is doing evil. Now, leaving aside
Yeah,
whether
now
we
you put
think
it that
that,
way. Now you put it that way, like like he almost, if he thinks narcissists are incurable and that they're like living under this like false persona, isn't that a kind of, he sort of, like, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it sounds like he's kind of got people who are at least very prone to evil in his community that aren't
well,
curable.
the thing about uh, I think a lot of these I think the thing we have to understand about the sort of Christian understanding of things is that we don't see anything wrong with punishment, traditionally speaking. We don't see anything wrong with retributive justice. Now, there have been moments in human history where, the people in charge of where political leaders get in charge, and there's this kind of panic. Usually, this happens during a time of political instability. Um, and in those instances, the community decides that we're going to castigate some scapegoat in order to secure ourselves to be, and they can be, and this leads to this can lead to very rash decisions, like some of the witch burnings. And by the way, the Inquisition was was actually a moderating force on this,
Oh my,
because
yeah.
if you
I mean, that's
if
not
you
what I was really. Oh, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, if you look at the Inquisition, what was happening was the difference between the Inquisition and the normal kind of witch burnings you would see in like a local area is the difference between vigilante killings and due process. It's that stark, basically. I mean, the Inquisition did not kill that many people. Neither did witch burnings, but if you compare the two, the Inquisition was clearly a moderating force and prevented these kinds of panics uh, from consuming entire communities and violence by being this sort of moderating force, trying putting up norms of due process that, quite frankly, that's what a government is supposed to do. That's why Christ implemented political institutions, authorities, so that you wouldn't have these situations where each individual thinks that it's his imperative to take upon himself the duties of the community and so it leads to this kind of uh, vigilante justice.
I mean, that wasn't what I was going to say. Actually, I would say something along the lines of, the thing with heretics is that they destabilize the society around them in the same way. In fact, I'd argue a worse way than Islamic terrorists do, because in most cases, I mean, there will be exceptions where their minds are changed. So that, that's setting that aside. For the majority of society, all the Islamic terrorists do is they kill people, right? This is a destabilizing influence, and this fellow here probably wouldn't dispute the fact that these people should be put in prison, even if they don't, even if they don't do anything, right? Because they are, maybe that he would dispute, but I think I'm going to be as charitable as possible with the guy. He might say they can stay out of prison, but I think he would probably put some restrictions on them, because the fact of the matter is that a society cannot tolerate destabilizing influences like this. And this is worse with heresy. Because heresy does, changes the minds of people towards something which is objectively false. It draws the society away from the truth, and it also has the effect of splitting the society. And so, therefore, these things need to be stopped in order to prevent the destabilization of the society, which leads to the exact sort of insularity that he describes later on in the video, right? Like, if everyone has just got their own beliefs and, everyone respects everyone and you can just have your own ideas, at least on the very basics of reality, then all you're doing is schisming the society repeatedly. You can't have a society based on that. It's like taking the foundation of your house and taking an extremely large sledgehammer to it repeatedly. You know, you let one heretic go, you know, it won't leave much of an issue, but wait until you just keep whacking away and you've got no foundation left. And then what happens when the floodwaters come or a hurricane comes? Well, you know, the house isn't as stable as it once was.
Yeah, I think
why.
that it, I think you're basically correct on that. What I would just say about splitting is he is correct about we're experiencing increasing political instability, and this is I think he's correct on this kind of splitting phenomenon. I think we are increasingly experiencing political instability, and this is causing political polarization. And this is common throughout pretty much any given take a look at any country that's experiencing or has experienced a civil war or a civil war-like scenario, and you'll find the same exact process playing out again and again and again. And you know, the Christianity does act as a moderating force because it tells you hate the sin, love the sinner. But even that, it's not exactly a it's not exactly a counter to it's only a moderating force, because the instability is real, the divisions are real, and the evil is real. It's just that Christianity is against completely demonizing the other side. You can acknowledge that the other side is doing evil and want to see them brought to justice over that, even to the point of wanting to, you know, do capital punishment against them. But but Christians are called to remind themselves that it is not the person that they are to hate, but the evil within the person. And I think this has been a consistent feature of Christian warfare for a very long time. You can go back to the Crusades, and you have I believe Saint Bernard talking about this, how, you know, Christians are not manslayers but evil slayers.
Yeah,
yeah,
I would say that it's current teaching of the church that, you know, execution is inadmissible. I would say that, and there was something else on the top of my head that's completely gone out of my head. What was it? I'm really wondering. Oh, that was it. We are in a perfect storm right now. Like, we have the financial problems that are dawning. We have war. We have political instability. I mean, you know, we are facing that kind of thing. But I certainly don't think it's nearly as...
unique?
I don't think it's nearly as... it's not nearly as uncommon as this fellow thinks. Should we continue? I don't want to, like, take too long.
Yes.
Like 5 hours at this rate.
It is a hallmark of immaturity, and it is the antidote to empathy. If you split, you can't be empathic. And if you're empathic, you can never split. Splitting precludes cooperation, shuns compromise, fosters conflict. If you see the other party as all bad, there's no possibility for bipartisanship. There's no possibility for collaboration. There's no possibility of building anything together. Teamwork. There's no possibility of forgiving. And so this is the age of splitting, where we carry and bear grudges forever and ever because they are part of our confirmation bias. Our grievances had become our identity. This is the age of victimhood. As the famous sociologist Campbell had said, we have transitioned from the age of reputation and dignity to the age of victimhood. Everyone and his dog is a victim, was a victim, or will become a victim. Victimhood confers a flawless, blemishless, angelic status on the victim. And of course, the abuser, the wrongdoer, the offender, they are demonic, without a single redeeming feature. Splitting does not let you put yourself in someone else's shoes, does not allow you to understand the other, or to at least try to.
I must admit, I do find this difficult with leftists. Like, I find it really difficult to see their point of view, considering what they're pushing. That was.
Well, I mean, having been a leftist myself, um, it's very intoxicating, because you see, because it does flatter the ego in a lot of ways, and it's exactly as he says. You by virtue Leftist morality is by virtue of you having certain political beliefs and you being on the right side of history, you are a good person. And the people who oppose you are either ignorant or malicious.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, I'm not talking about their particular view. I'm saying I find it difficult personally to view them in a good light.
Oh
Because of the
yes. uh,
yeah, just because of how utterly egregious and satanic their views are.
oh yes, of course. I think I it is difficult to talk to see them in a good light because of that. I think honestly, you what I always keep in mind is even if you don't think the other person is, maybe a good person, you can still look at their ideas and criticize their ideas without uh, at- without focusing overly much on the character. Yes, sometimes criticism of an idea of a person's ideas will involve criticism of the person themselves, but that when you're doing something more intellectual, that's not supposed to be part of it. And also, I think you have to keep in mind that a lot of these people, when it comes to most leftists are the way they are because that is how they were raised. That is how they've been taught to view the world. And, you know, if you can, if you demonstrate through your actions a sort of Christ-like virtue, you can sort of you can use their persecution of you to gain merit, uh, to gain heavenly merit, and also by acting Christ-like, you can shake their worldview. Because remember, uh, their worldview is based on the idea that anyone opposed to them must be either malicious or stupid. And so, if you are very obviously neither, then it will it will give them reasons to doubt themselves, unless they're just that far gone.
Yeah, let's continue.
Splitting is a major problem, and it is at the core of everything that's happening nowadays. It is also the age of death. It is the age, starting with the Industrial Revolution, where material goods, inanimate objects, dead objects, are considered far more valuable than human life. Protestations to the contrary notwithstanding, we value human life today much less than we had done, for example, in the Middle Ages. Human life is a dispensable commodity convertible into a bottom line.
I think that I don't know if I go that far, but I mean, I can sort of see his point.
Oh yeah, I think he'll go on later to talk about this being a part of materialism, and what he means by a culture of death might is not exactly what pro-life, someone who's pro-life would talk about. Oh, we look at how easily we children, but he talks about how we value dead things like computers and iPods more than we do other human beings. And so we are materialistic, and in that sense we are in an age of death, because we have these dead objects and that we value them more than our bonds with other humans.
I disagree because I think that I mean this is the perpetual human sin. I think that we do actually live in a culture of life. I think that we live in a culture of the self, and the self is living, which is kind of has the contrary thing, as Christ says, the he who lays down his life shall gain it, and he who tries to preserve his life shall lose it. You know, so there is kind of like a perception of life. I don't think that people care anything about their iPods except for insofar as it gratifies them.
Well, I think, yeah, we might disagree on that. I do think we live in a very materialistic culture, and it plays into the self gratification too, because we care about, satisfying ourselves, and the things that we think satisfy ourselves are, generally speaking, material in nature, consumer goods. And I think he also talks. Well, we'll just let him speak.
Life is used to produce consumer goods in slavery conditions. Human life is sacrificed in a variety of ways, armed conflicts, other ways. It is the age of death because we elevate and venerate and worship the dead over the living, the inanimate over the animate, the material over the good. The age of death has two subversive, unexpected effects. One, we all become consumer goods. We all become consumables. We are commoditized and commodified. In order to acquire value, in order to be considered valuable, we brand ourselves. We become brands, commercial brands. Brand me. And others perceive us as consumer goods, something to be purchased, used, and then discarded. That's the first effect of the death cult that we call Western civilization, or modern and postmodern civilization. The second effect of the age of death is that we develop a death wish. If death becomes the predominant value, if to be dead is considered better than to be alive, then we all wish to be dead. We perceive death as the ultimate state of being. It's a form of enlightenment. Death brings us happiness. We buy a smartphone. We feel elated and euphoric. We had purchased our small piece of death. So when we acquire death, when we interact with death, we are contaminated, we're infected by death itself, and we develop a death wish. Indeed, suicidality, straightforward suicidality, and numerous other forms of slow motion, indirect suicide, for example, substance abuse, are on the rise. They're exploding exponentially because...
You see, this is where I disagree with him completely, because it's not a culture
Well, he's
of death.
speaking in a...
Yeah, I know he's speaking in a kind of a poetic way, right?
Yeah, he certainly is, and I think that's part of the problem, because when you unpack what he means, you could easily say what he's actually saying is we live in a culture of hedonism. I think that's what he's trying to say.
Yeah, like we live... The thing is that because he throws out, like, the religion question, what else are people supposed to seek? They can't... Like people seek out what they perceive as virtues, which is, strength, money, other things, their ability to have power over those things. They seek out, I mean, like, if you take away God, if you take away objective truth even for some people, what are they supposed to seek out? Because man is naturally drawn to the good. He chooses the highest good. And to then, like, if you got rid of objective values of virtue, if you've taken away God, what are they supposed to seek beyond pleasure? I don't see him answering this question. What, like, he talks like, oh, I wish we'd return to a more rational age. I mean, dude, like, you don't even believe in religion. He might believe in God. I doubt it. I don't think he does. Right? He might do. But, like, you've gotten rid of people's purpose. What do you expect them to seek other than pleasure?
The suicidality, and it does come from a kind of from the social atomism that he's going to talk about later. The suicidality is not caused by literally interacting with inanimate objects. That's kind of silly. It is, and the sort of connection between hedonism and the death cult is a bit more interesting than perhaps his poetic expressions are talking about. Because if you see pleasure as the highest good, and then you look across your life, you will find that your life is full of suffering, and that the suffering of your life is going to be worth more, is going to be more than your pleasure. That is to say, you will suffer more often than you feel gratification, than you feel pleasure. And so it might come to you might come to see life as being on net just more suffering. So it's better to just not have children, not create new life. And this is where the anti-natalist movement comes from. I mean, I've done some stuff about that. Did you know that there was a guy from India who wanted to sue his parents for giving birth to him because he didn't consent to their giving birth to him, and he's against that.
I mean, like I think, yeah. I mean, it's silly, but what does he expect people to do? Like sit there and be rational? They're gonna die someday. What's the point in them being rational? They might as well like
Exactly,
they might.
right?
I mean, they might as well enjoy it themselves, right? In their mind. Like, what are you going to propose to them more? Like reading scientific papers? Like, if they don't find that enjoyable, then what's the point? There's no reason for them to pursue truth. That the truth, if there isn't even truth, and removing religion from the equation, you've given them no purpose. How do you expect them to fulfill a society? Let's continue.
If we are nothing but consumer goods, if we perceive ourselves and others as commodities, then death is the natural state, and life is the aberration, the unusual exception. People don't know what to do with life. Their lives are meaningless because only death confers meaning. Only material dead goods equate significance. And so they don't know what to do with the life they had been given. And they kill themselves, and they kill everyone around them, and they kill their environment, and they kill others. It is the age of spectacle. Guy Debord said it. Anomic societies, as Emile Durkheim had observed, tend to foster suicide in individuals, but also they tend to bring about and engender mental suicide. Now, one way to commit mental suicide is to not be you, to vanish, to disappear as an authentic voice and an authentic self, and reappear as a theater production, as an apparition, as an appearance, as a facade, as a camouflage, as a disguise. And so people place much more emphasis, almost exclusive emphasis, on appearances. How do they appear to others? How do others react to their appearance? The need to be seen is overwhelming. And in order to be noticed and seen, and in order to appear the right way, to position yourself relatively to others in an advantageous place, in order to accomplish all this, people escalate their behaviors. They lose their boundaries. They go nuts. It's a period of crazy making where everyone tries to outdo others in order to gain not 15 minutes of attention, but 15 seconds of likes. Social media are the reification of this age of the spectacle. It is the age of self-sufficiency.
Okay, pause it.
Everyone. See.
All right.
Yep.
So he's talking about the age of the spectacle, and he says that he speaks in a kind of mental suicide. He speaks of this age of spectacle as a kind of self-suicide, and this actually gets into his beliefs about narcissism, because part of his research, one of the reasons why he thinks that narcissism is incurable is because he thinks that the true self in the narcissist, the true self, the core of their personality, is replaced by delusions of grandeur, a false self. He actually says the false self replaces the narcissist's true self and is intended to shield him from hurt and narcissistic injury by self-imputing omnipotence. The narcissist pretends his false self is real and demands that others affirm his confabulation. So in his view, this false self is sort of overtakes their true self, and it becomes their reality. I think this age of spectacle he's talking about is really like this kind of increasing emphasis on image over substance. Or what do you think?
Well, I mean, he's basically just described pure pride, because it's like this omnipotence or whatever is, it sounds to me basically just like an over attribution of your abilities, right? And I mean, there are plenty of cures for it. We've been writing about them for thousands of bloody years. You need
Right.
to become humble in order to do this. And
Humility is key. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
exactly.
like,
Humility is key.
and people do change. Like, it's incurable. I mean, if that's what he describes, right? Of course, it's bloody curable. People have been doing it, like I said, for thousands of years. If it's merely a mis um a misestimation of yourself, yeah, it takes a while, but you know, it is what it is. Let's continue.
Seeks autonomy, agency, independence, and self-efficacy. While in the past, until the very recent past, interdependence was hallowed and praised, and relationships implied relatedness, implied interconnectivity, implied interdependence. These were the values of humanity throughout history until more or less 40 years ago. But now the overriding value is aloneness, atomization, separateness, self-sufficiency as a form of individuation. People seek to separate from other people, and by separating from them, become individuals. Individuality, therefore, one's sense of self and personality now depend crucially on antagonism. You are who you are in opposition to someone, in contrast to someone, as distinct from someone, separate from someone. And so we drift apart. We drift apart. Yes, we are self-sufficient. Technology affords us this self-containment. We can all become schizoid hermits. And shortly, with the metaverse, we'll be able to have everything right at our doorstep.
I mean, the thing is that the internet has a funny way of producing people who, if the internet were disconnected, they would basically become hermits in a way, because they'd be so utterly unable to relate to the people around them that how would they relate? It's like a collection of algorithm stratified subcultures. So I don't think I'd go as
All
far as to
right.
say, like, yeah, I don't think I'd go that far.
I mean, so I would agree that the internet does lead to this kind of self stratification, this kind of self isolation, where you it becomes harder to relate to people in real life because because it becomes all consuming basically. There's no it seems the world of touch screens is so much more gratifying than real life social interaction.
You see, the thing is that some people say to touch grass, and it's like, why would I touch grass? I'm just walking outside into people who live the exact same life. Like, the only people who don't live this kind of life are people who are 20 years older than me. And even then, they might still live that life. You go to the only thing that's uniting them is maybe like an appreciation for LGBTQ. I can't relate to that. You know,
Hmm.
what's the point of touching grass if you go out there and you come across a culture which is sinful? Or in the extreme. What's the point? Let's continue.
Inside our apartments, sex included, virtual sex. The workplace, we don't need to go to work anymore. We can work from home. Entertainment, we don't need to go to a cinema. We have everything at home. And sex, there will be artificial. Majority of men and women had no encounter with the opposite sex of any kind. And so, whatever contact there is between you.
He says that between like 2016, like men and women don't have connections with the opposite sex of any kind or something. That's what he said. Which,
Yeah, I mean
yeah, that's
I mean, I would argue that that is due to the availability of, shall we say, virtual pleasures.
yeah to some people, yeah, but like you know, it's an ersatz substitute, and of course it's one that drives people mad.
Yes. Yeah, it does. It does. It makes people miserable because it's no replacement for a real relationship.
Mousekind says most people still have to go to work in person. I don't, and to be honest, I'm glad I work at home. I'd much rather. In fact, I think that working at home is actually a very positive thing. I think I think that if you at least can coordinate your social life so far, insofar as you go out after work, right? I think it's a profoundly positive thing because it leaves you in the house, particularly if you're married, right? You can just be with your family. Granted, that's not what the majority of people are living with, so yeah, maybe it is bad for them. Yeah. You want to continue?
Right, right. Yes, yes.
Human beings had become transactional, cursory, peremptory, prefatory, meaningless, emotionless, passing, fleeting, forgettable. When we start to forget each other, that's the end. And we're in the age of forgetting. Our biggest emotional investment is in forgetting, not in remembering. We try to forget traumas. We try to erase bad relationships. We try to put behind us all kinds of things. Self-help, the self-help industry, is all about becoming someone else. Discontinuity, breaking
I actually think this is completely true.
up with the past, deleting and reframing it. There's no memory, individual, institutional, or societal. Culture is about instant gratification, the here and now, and even in psychotherapy, we have mindfulness therapies, which tell you forget the past, forget the future, focus on the here and now. It is the age of the present, because you're self sufficient only in the present. It is also the age of risk aversion. People are terrified of risks of all kinds, big and small. They go into inordinate lengths in time, resources, and investment in order to avoid risks. Ironically, this only serves to increase risk. The only way to avoid risk is by working with other people, collaborating and cooperating towards a common goal, striving towards a common aim and purpose with a clear, unified, and shared agenda. In the age of splitting, risk rises exponentially. In the age of self-sufficiency, any small break in the supply chain, any downtime in the technology renders you vulnerable. So this extreme risk aversion actually has led to a society, to a civilization which is much more brittle and fragile than anything we had ever seen before. Witness what's happening around us. Have a look at how we responded to COVID-19. Ukraine. We are surrounded by ever-increasing risks, even as we try our best to avoid them. We believe that by avoiding risks, we're going to live longer, we're going to have better lives, and so on. It's narcissism. Each one of us is a god. Each one of us is of cosmic significance. And so we need to preserve our bodies and minds and our environment, neutralize and sterilize.
I mean, to be fair, in a certain sense, we all do have a certain cosmic significance, but that's probably not what it
Yeah.
means. That's
Yeah,
probably
I
not what.
mean, he's talking about, again, he's talking about narcissism, pride.
Yeah,
Yeah, when he talks about, see, this is the part that resonated with me, this kind of middling part of the video, where he talks about the breakdown, the sort of risk aversion, um, breakdown of social trust. These things are real things that are happening in our society. And you can make a case that this is largely unprecedented because of technology. You can make that case. I'm not sure you can make the case that it's like this is an equivalent of dystopia, because I think, for one thing, I think it can get a lot worse. Uh, but I think it can get a lot worse before it gets better. But um, if he's talking about this kind of social atomization, then he is correct in that the way we are relating to one another and our dependence not on humans but on these kinds of grand supply chains, these complex machines have made us more brittle. And that, so I guess what he would advocate for is instead of reliance on the internet and on international supply chains, we should instead try to rely on each other.
fellas, we need to
You
return
know,
to
our
tradition.
neighbors. We need to rely on our neighbors, basically. Yes.
Yeah, I must admit that's something that bugs me because it's like, well, I go find my neighbors, I find the people my age, and they're interested in. You know, it's kind of like when Abraham left the land of Babylon and found himself in Canaan. You know, surrounded by hostile neighbors who he would never have his children marry. It's basically that. That's where we
Yeah,
find ourselves.
I think, I mean, that's part of the. I mean, but that what you're describing right there is a result of the atomization that he's talking about, where even if you have a few individuals who want to break free, when they look around, they see nothing but people who are ensconced in this culture.
Yeah, can you blame people for setting up Wacos? Like, can you blame them for going and forming compounds with a couple of like-minded individuals? Not really. You can't blame them for doing, like, what's it, the Benedict option? You know, there's... That's the thing, it's like, you know, you're surrounded by people who are not only just as atomized, but most of whom believe in a civil religion which is utterly antithetical to yours, and, like, in some cases, like, it's anti at least some versions of your religion. It's living in a hostile society that's already itself, splintered. It sucks. Let's continue.
All right.
Our environment so that it's risk-free. This risk aversion is an aversion to life itself. It's a rejection of life, because life is risk. Growth is loss. Development is pain. Suffering is the engine of evolution and progress. It should be minimized to the best of our ability, but it should never be avoided altogether. Because to avoid it altogether is to inhabit cemeteries known as cities. Only in a cemetery there are no risks anymore. It is the age of magical thinking, confronted with a harsh reality which we cannot control.
And this is where the takes start to... Like, this is a dreadful take.
All right, yeah.
Outside of our grasp, with zero influence, significance, or meaning, where we are nothing but ants or atoms or...
Remember what I said about insulting guys? Don't insult him or I'll act on the chat and, like, control yourselves on the other end of your screen. Seriously.
Statistics. Confronted with this, we develop a belief in magic, magical thinking. If I only put my mind to it, good things will happen. The sheer force of my will rearrange the universe to cater to my needs. I'm an angel. There's no flaw in me. I'm blameless and blemishless. All these are forms of magical thinking. The belief that one's thoughts, emotions, and moods can and do affect reality. It's a form of impaired reality.
Well, I mean, in a sense, that's just me actually him. Never mind.
Testing. And we all live in an age of magical thinking because, as Clarke, the famous sci-fi author, had said, modern science is indistinguishable from magic. Modern technology is indistinguishable from magic. It's magical. So with this magic in our hands, the smartphone, for example, we feel as wizards do. We are wizardly. We're all Harry Potters. And this magical thinking draws us further and further away from reality. We become less and less efficacious, less able to control ourselves, our boundaries, our impulses, our urges, our behaviors, other people around us, less able to influence and shape things to come in our own lives. We withdraw into fantasy. It's a pernicious psychological defense mechanism. And in this fantasy, we are grandiose, all-knowing, all-powerful, at least in potential. We have infinite ability to change and transform and transmute everything that's bad and threatening and risky, and bring about everything that's desirable and hopeful. But this is nonsense. It's a fairy tale for the feeble-minded and the weak, exactly like religion. The belief in entities such as God and angels and demons is a form of...
You see, he's got this funny take, right? He
doing
thinks
the-
that
he's
this is
doing
just
the,
like the magic woo. It's like
he's doing the kind of new atheist shtick where you say that anyone who believes in God is just delusional, who has a mental illness. In fact, he has entire papers he's written. Part of his work is actually, and I've actually looked this up. There is actually on a blog there's this interview he did where he argues that religion is a form of he says it's a form of it's a sublimated, that is socially acceptable form of delusional disorder whose
Hmm.
contents include a supreme being or power which dictates a code of conduct and sanctions transgressors.
Yeah,
Religion is
I
the
don't. I
institutional
don't.
manifestation
Buckley.
of this mental illness
Buckley.
hijacked by
Buckley. I don't
psychopaths
think we
and
need.
narcissists.
Buckley, like, there's no need to go into any detail. I think he's done enough. Uh, he is. I mean, this is the sign of a man who doesn't understand what he's critiquing. Like he thinks, like this is somebody who has never actually taken the effort, probably, to read what people have actually said about those writings. Like if he's seriously gonna straight facedly claim that the religious texts are this, like he just doesn't know what he's talking about because of the massive intersection between philosophy and theology. Is he gonna turn around with a straight face and tell me that Socrates was some sort of bloody narcissist? Is he seriously going to sit there and tell me that Aristotle or any sort of theistic? Is he going to tell me Descartes was a narcissist too? Is he going to tell me Immanuel Kant? These people in his Enlightenment that he loves so much, right? Were these
I
people
mean,
narcissists? They believed in God. What are they
I mean,
delusional?
later on, he believes. I mean, he actually says in this, he just asserts like basic new atheist takes here. Like his response, he says, "We believe that God exists, but we cannot falsify his existence. We can't prove that he exists. There is no, there is, there is no." And he only considers the design argument, and he says, "Knowledge and belief are like oil and water; they don't mix. Knowledge doesn't lead to belief, and belief does not yield knowledge. Belief can yield conviction or strongly felt opinion, but belief cannot result in knowledge." And I can link to this interview. He goes into a great deal
Okay
of
then. Okay then.
detail.
What I'd ask him is like, why does he believe 2 + 2 = 4 then? Like, where's your strong conviction there? Have you proved it? Of course he bloody hasn't. He's a psychologist. There's your bloody strongly held conviction. I also believe there's such a thing as existence, my friend. Now, where is this existence? What characteristics does it have? Are we personal for no reason? Nonsense. Of course. But
Well,
he hasn't thought about this.
well, it says here. Well, he actually does talk about numbers in this interview. He says, "We cannot conceive of the world without numbers, relations, and properties. For instance, these are necessary entities because
Why?
without them, the world as we know and perceive it would not exist. This is not. Is this equally true when we contemplate God? Can we conceive of a godless world? Moreover, numbers, and of course, rhetorical is it's a rhetorical question. He thinks that we can conceive of a godless world." And he says, "Moreover, numbers, relations, and properties are abstracts. Yet God is thought of as a concrete being. Can a concrete being, regardless of the properties imputed to it, ever be necessary? Is there a single concrete being, God, without which the universe would have perished or not existed in the first
This is
place? If
so.
so, what makes God a privileged concrete entity?"
This is such a silly take. Like, imagine a world without existence, and then you've just imagined a world without God, because God is pure existence. But he doesn't know this. So I think we can stop dunking on his take and just kind of continue.
Magical thinking.
Yeah,
Immature, infantile, not very clever, to use an understatement. It is not an accident. It's not by coincidence that this is the age where belief in the occult, in conspiracy theories, in incredible nonsense.
Well, sorry, demons do exist. Lots of accounts of them. Do you think that? Do you think that a 2,000-year-old institution like the Catholic Church would keep paying exorcists if they didn't have a use?
In religion is growing
I mean,
again
yeah,
after an
thinks that.
interlude of 250 years of enlightenment.
Sorry, sorry.
I mean, to be honest, I think he would because he literally thinks that religions are. religious institutions are nothing but institutionalized insanity. Like, just reams of narcissists and psychopaths top down, from the top to the bottom. I mean, I mean, he actually said in one of his videos that narcissists are incredibly hard to detect. It's almost impossible to detect without like his psychoanalytic theories.
Okay,
But
so like when the table is floating of its own accord, then who do I call? Right? Oh, that never
uh,
happens. That never happens. No, 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 no. You don't understand. This is just all woo. So then, why do we see this repeated constantly in data then? Why are
well,
poltergeists an actual phenomenon that have actual historical accounts of them and studies into them? I might add. Is this something that we're supposed to ignore?
I think also this is something that I really need to emphasize. There's a major difference between magic and religion that he is overlooking, and he just throws them together as if they're the same thing.
You
But I
know,
think there's a great video. There's a great uh, bit by Roger Scruton, which talks when he's critiquing Harry Potter. Roger Scruton, those you don't know, he's famous conservative writer, recently passed away. God help his soul. He he did this a bit where he talked about the difference between magic and religion. Uh, in his mind, magic magic says I can use certain spells, rites, and rituals to control the world, bend reality to my will. Whereas religion is all about submission to a higher or of the will to a higher order of reality. They are inverted, and he says this is one of the reasons. Given this kind of inversion, it's no surprise that religion and magic have been at odds throughout human history. And he also said, and he actually does make the connection. Roger Scruton makes the connection that this psychologist makes between magic and science and technology, because there is this kind of technological mindset which says, well, if we can use these certain gadgets and gizmos, we can alter the cosmos according to our design, and we have this godlike ability to alter reality to our design thanks to all these wonderful toys that we've invented. And that sort of came out of the scientific revolution. Sir Francis Bacon, uh, and others like him had this kind of idea, and it's very it's very pernicious in our culture.
what I would actually ask this fellow as well is what is the fundamental difference between the magisterium of the church and the magisterium of the universities? Because if he wants to say it's logic, then he really should read some dogmatic theological books. Because they aren't, like, it's not like people didn't think about these things before they made them, dogmas to be believed.
Yeah, but this is the problem with him. He has this unfalsifiable theory, and this comes out of Freudianism, by the way. He has this unfalsifiable theory that anybody who is religious is is a narcissist, and so he can explain away smart. He can explain away smart people who disagree with him as just, oh, they're just crazy. They're just crazy. They're not really. They're just trying to dress it up with. They're just trying to hide the fact that when you dig down deep, it's really nothing substantial. It's all fake. It's all narcissism. It's all delusion. At the end, I'm right. I'm superior, and anybody else who disagrees with me is crazy. that's that is Freudian psychoanalysis. And by the way, I'm not. This is not something you're required to believe if you are an atheist. You're not required to believe this. if you don't believe in religion, don't believe in God, this is just a part. But this is a very common feature of modern ideologies like Freudianism, Marxism, Nietzschean philosophy. A lot of them have this hermeneutics of suspicion, where you look at other people and you just dismiss them as being sort of embodiments of whatever social forces you don't like as a and and by dismissing them like that, you don't have to engage with their arguments.
I don't know if he actually holds to that view. I will say.
Well,
Maybe.
yeah, but I know he might he probably would deny that is what he's doing, but this is a part of his field. I mean, this is sort of baked into he is a psychoanalyst. He is his field is psychoanalysis. This is a huge part of his view, and it's very apparent where and he talks about religion the exact same way that Sigmund Freud did, by the
Yeah, but
way.
it doesn't mean anything. Like, there could be different. I think there are different schools. I wouldn't tar him with the same brush as Freud. Freud is, like, very much in the past, I'm told, by potentially a certain woman who's watching this who has a master's degree in psychology. That would be my fiance. So,
Yeah, I do think yeah, Freud he you are correct that Freud is not like he's not looked upon very fondly by a large number of psychologists for exactly the reasons that I've been giving. But when I what I'm saying is when you the way he talks about religion and the way Freud talks about religion as just narcissistic delusion, this is kind of the Freudian attitude towards faith. Uh, it, Freud and others others in that tradition did not really argue against religion. They do not consider the argument. They never considered the argument seriously. They were always more concerned with trying to psychoanalyze people on the assumption that they were wrong. And this is pretty much what he does. I mean, when you come
I
in
mean,
to an
I don't
interview
know.
and you start out, yeah,
I don't know. Maybe he's just. Honestly, I think he's just got this view of history, which is like just very. It's a very 20th century idea of history, which
exactly.
is
I
like
mean, it's like
like there in the beginning there was darkness and the church ruled over the earth, and then science said, let there be, the Enlightenment.
exactly, yeah. That is very clearly a part of his worldview, and that's probably is playing into his assertion that the modern age is a dystopia.
Yeah, let's continue.
We are drawn back to the darkest recesses of the Middle Ages, long before the Arab Enlightenment in the 9th and 10th centuries.
You mean the Arab Enlightenment that was powered by Christian manuscripts? Okay, fam.
Period where people were primitive and superstitious.
Maybe Persian.
All the way back there. Anything from astrology, through homeopathy, through conspiracy theories, through counterfactual nationalism. These are all forms of magical thinking.
We're just yeah, it's just it's just a laundry list of things he doesn't like, and
dude.
we're just throwing it all together. This is a common theme among, and this is probably what I'm going to get into towards the end. I'm probably going to talk about this towards the end. This style, I really don't like this style of video, honestly. But continue.
Yeah.
It is the age of entitlement. People believe that they deserve things. and they deserve things not by virtue of any investment or commitment, not as an outcome of some effort or studies or hard work, not because of perspiration. Edison said that invention is 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. No, this is the age of inspiration only. Magical thinking. Entitlement is a derivative of magical thinking. Because I'm magical, I'm entitled.
I mean, the thing is that you often don't get rewarded for your hard work, so, like, why does he think the work is entitled to any sort of reward?
Yeah, I mean, it's presupposing an idea of apparently.
Works-based salvation. I mean, it's kind of like a secular kind of, like, I won't say works-based, like, you know?
Pelagianism.
Yeah, like, basically, you know, it's like a work, it's kind of Pelagian, like, I think obviously, you know, if you don't work, you're gonna die, but that doesn't mean that your work entitles you to something.
And I'm entitled by virtue of existing. My very existence and being entitle me. Entitle me to what? To special treatment, to goodies, to freebies, to access, to power, to fame and celebrity, those who are famous for being famous. It's an age of vacuity, an age of emptiness and void, an age where people compete with
I don't think it's fair to call him Pelagian, I don't know.
each
Well, I
other,
suppose he'd have
not
to.
in order to elevate each other or themselves, not in order to accomplish things and move further, not in order to have an impact and make a difference, but they compete with each other in order to establish themselves as superior in some way. And this superiority can be among the ruins. So,
Well, yeah, of course, it's a warped way of humanity pursuing the good. I don't know why he thinks this is somehow unique. I mean, this was used in ancient Greece. It was called the agon, the competition. You know, like that's where the word agony comes from. Like, why does he think this is unique?
people destroy, and by destroying, they feel superior. Even destruction has become an art form, because if you reduce other people, you elevate yourself. If you destroy, you build yourself. If you diminish through pathological envy and acts of aggression, if you diminish and humiliate and degrade other people, then you are godlike, aren't you? This is the age of entitlement, aggressive, nefarious, dangerous entitlement. And it is above all the age of distrust. It's the age of pervasive mistrust. Mistrust of experts, mistrust of science, mistrust of...
Well, I mean, this assumes that the experts are actually experts. Well, that's the thing,
Well, I mean,
right?
the thing is, he is an expert. It's very much in his interest that people trust the experts, aka him.
Well, I wouldn't place this on him necessarily. He might be completely genuine, but going back to his decision, his discussion of religion, why should I regard the academy as having any particular, like, anything over a church? You know, people in the church study, people in the academia study, right? They both use logic. Why should I consider academia to be so great, right? And you know, like a lot of these people who believe in flat Earth and things like this, like a lot of people who believe in this sort of creationism stuff. You know why I think they don't actually believe these experts and these academics, and particularly people in this sort of field? It's because they keep pushing degeneracy, right? These academics are the same. Are like in this kind of milieu. I won't assert it on him, but you know, people in whatever studies, they want children to transition. Some of them, right? They've pushed abortion. They've pushed all of these societal evils. Why would these people listen to the academy and to the quote-unquote experts when what a lot of the experts are doing is just making reality an objectively more harsh and unpleasant place? Like, if the experts can't do visible good, then what's the point in having a bloody expert? What, so he can impose his views? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think a lot of this has to do with a lot of people are starting to wake up and realize that no, that experts are not these dispassionate men in lab coats who pursue the truth and are totally trustworthy and independent. I mean, the philosophy. It's amazing how many we love science types have not read anything written about philosophy of science since Popper. I mean, have you these kinds of people have a very these people who have this naive view of the experts and of science don't take into account the idea that, oh, maybe experts can be wrong. Maybe
I mean,
experts not only can be wrong, but maybe they can also be there could also be systemic problems within an academic truth making institution,
you know,
truth discovery institution.
one example, right? His own field. Null hypothesis statistical testing, right? There's a whole argument because their statistical method used in many of these studies is balked. It produces garbage, right? And it's been doing so since the 1960s. Why should I trust experts when they can't even get their bloody statistical methods correct? Like,
It's
how?
it's a wonder, really. I mean, most people don't mistrust the experts because of their own experiences and how their experiences really don't line up with what the experts are saying. That and it becomes an instance where they have to choose between their own blind eyes or the authority of the experts. That's usually what's causing this. And I also think the it's I don't think the experts are. I think the main reason why the experts are losing people's trust is because people in power, authority figures, have been making a lot of different promises, a lot of these grandiose promises, and not delivering. And so, of course, people are going to start distrusting them.
Well, yeah, like he's like on one hand he's saying, I mean, he's kind of implicitly saying this, right? He said there's no institutions, and then he's saying these people don't trust the experts. Doesn't that imply the presence of an institution? Doesn't that imply that
Yes,
academia exists? So, so,
hyper.
so what's it going to
I
be?
mean, yeah, this is where his the kind of hyperbolic language he's using really works against him rhetorically.
Hey, the fiance's just joined the chat. We're discussing psychology. you know, I don't know. True Trad Waifu. Do you mind if I discuss like the intense discussion that actually started our relationship? Because this is actually relevant. You see where Kingdom of Mousecline mentioned 60 years of garbage. I'm discussing null hypothesis statistical testing. Yeah, we have some history with that Buckley. I'll tell the story if she's happy with it. But
All
yeah,
right.
like these people, right? Like this guy has spent all this time lambasting like the lack of institutions or whatever, and he's appealing to experts who are determined to be experts by an institution. Like, what is an expert beyond somebody who has a PhD or tenure? Is this not endowed by an institution? Like, I'm sorry. Like, I have real problems. I mean, I'm sure it's better in certain fields than others. Like, I haven't seen any particular problems in computer science research, but I'm telling you, biblical studies is a bloody like hellhole. It should be almost ignored, pretty much, a lot of it, right? A lot of the takes are like hilarious. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
especially the older stuff, like just like the four source theory thing. Like at least the original version by Wellhausen is completely just gone now, right? Okay, so she said I can tell the story. So we had a little bit of an argument over null hypothesis statistical testing, and I was showing how it was Borks, and she disagrees because she's in psychology, and yeah, this ended up like me getting an instinct to sort of be nice to her, and yeah, then I ended up in her DMs, and we're together, and now we're getting married. So yeah, that's the story. So you want to continue,
Wow.
Buckley? Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, congratulations, man.
Yeah,
I
thanks.
mean, that sounds. I mean, that sounds like, man. I have to say that that is. Mm, I hope to meet my future wife one day like that.
I don't know. I had a strange instinct. Like I was at the point where I was with the guys, and I'm like, "You guys aren't trying to set me up, right?" I was like, "No, I feel like there was like a sense of it was like sort of meant to be." And yeah, here we are. I've got when I proposed to her, I didn't have the ring. I actually have the ring in my hand right now in the box. So little thing.
Oh,
But yeah,
man. All
I'll
right.
continue though.
Let's
I don't
we
want
can
to. We're nearly done. So let's get this finished off.
Of the authorities, mistrust of the future, and above all, mistrust of each other. Everyone is wary of being played. Everyone has a pet conspiracy theory. Everyone is a potential victim. Everyone seeks to compensate for a sense of helplessness and inferiority by pretending to be grandiose and superior. Nowhere is the mistrust more profound than between men and women in all age groups, from all backgrounds, everywhere in the world. The mistrust between men and women had brought on something that can only be described
Man, True Tribe Wifey, you timed it perfectly.
as a war among the
Because he's
genders.
gonna get.
It's an outright war, tooth and claw and bleeding nail, unto death, between men and women. Now we are civilized beings, so it's all disguised in the form of academic articles, amazing studies, and newspaper opinion pieces. These are the new modern weapons in culture wars. But there is a war between men and women. And no, it's not limited to the manosphere.
So why is this guy? So why is this guy like saying? Nobody trusts the experts, and then he says. Articles are weapons. Come on, my dude.
I mean, maybe, yeah, maybe the reason why, yeah, maybe the reason why nobody trusts the experts is because the experts are wielding using articles as weapons against each other rather than, I don't know, ways of communicating truth.
I mean, I've read some really funny studies in my time. Like they're too explicit to list, but I'll say this. There have been some very interesting studies on homophobes. I've read.
I'd love to see some of them. Maybe I could
Oh,
do a stream on them sometime.
the method is really funny, right? I won't discuss it on here because it's really explicit, but it's just the
Oh,
methodology
oh,
is
is it
hilarious.
explicit? I'm sorry. So, all right. Well, maybe you can DM me some of those kind of goofy studies. Anyway, um, I want to, I do want to say that he's going to start getting into the conflict between men and women. I do strongly agree with him that there is this breakdown of trust between men and women, and this is part of what's driving. This is a symptom of the atomization. This is what's driving the lowering levels of interaction between the sexes. This kind of distrust, this general distrust. Of course, He is approaching this from more the feminist side. So he's going to say that this is men's insecurity about women gaining more privileges. Truly becoming equal. Um, but he acknowledges that both sides have this distrust of each other.
Yeah, let's continue with
Uh,
this. My glasses just
mhm,
fell on the floor, so I had to grab them.
Sphere. Deranged males like MGTOWs and incels. It's
I mean, I don't think it's fair to call them deranged. Like some of them have like serious mental problems, but a lot of them are just despairing because they have this view of the world. I mean, particularly incels, right? It just doesn't exist. The reality doesn't exist as they think it is. But just to call them like just deranged, I don't think it's charitable.
mm,
in the dating scene. It's within marriages. It's in divorce proceedings in court. Everywhere, men are fighting women and women are fighting men to the last beat. Women, wary of men, are now trying to become utterly self-sufficient and single mothers if possible. self-sufficient financially, self-sufficient biologically. Men, terrified of women's ascendance and newfound independence, are trying to re-establish a patriarchy, to suppress women, and to punish them in the only arena where they still have an advantage: the bedroom, sex, and relationships. Abuse.
Bruh, I don't know if that's true. I mean, I still think that there's other advantages that men have just because they're men intrinsically. In fact, if anything, I think that women have more power. Like,
I
yeah,
mean, women. Well, yeah, women have a lot of power politically right now. My friend Max is very red pilled on this idea. But even when we're talking about, even just abuse, when you're talking about abuse, you really want to be careful because that word abuse um, is very loose. And if you're using abuse in the a more general sense, um, men and women abuse each other about equally. It's just that men can leave more of a physical mark on women, whereas female physical abuse isn't usually as um, it doesn't usually damage the men physically as much, for obvious reasons, mind you.
yeah,
But the rate of abuse between men and women is about the same.
yeah. We're getting commentary from True Trad Waifu in the chat. Could you like make your views clearer? Because I just see what? Like I don't know if you're responding to the geezer or if you're responding to Barkley. So if you could make that clear, that'd be appreciated. But I don't know about abuse rates. I'm very very suspicious of some of the takes he has later on about infidelity. I think that it's lower than he suggests because I know for a fact that there's like loads of variant statistics on who's cheating and for what reasons, and it also doesn't come to the conclusion that he wants it to as well. The
Hmm.
amount. Oh wait, that's Charlie Adams. Never mind. I'll just continue with this and wait for waifu to type it out.
Is more rife than ever. Around 70% of men and women say that they deeply or somewhat distrust the opposite sex. That's 70. The remainder totally or somewhat distrust their counterparties. Women complain that men are feminine, not committed or invested, weak, ineffectual, and craven. The
I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's true.
vagaries of online dating serve to augment this inauspicious view of men. All they want is sex. Men describe women as sexually unboundaried, prone to cheating and drunkenness, and cunning. A whopping
Yeah. I mean, I think that's true for a lot of women too. I think
Yeah.
that these assessments from both sides are basically true. Like men have become effeminate. Women, I mean, like a lot of them, they're just not loyal. They really aren't. And I think more than that, I think a lot of women are hugely arrogant, and it's really ugly.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of yeah, I mean both sides are both sides are seeing the worst in the other side and they are saying, well, we're just going to check out. And quite frankly, all of this comes from this kind of atomization, this decrease in social trust. This all feeds into that. Um, Alongside, of course, the arrogance that this culture, the modern culture, is afflicted with.
I mean, I don't know. I can certainly perceive it in a lot of women, right? I think for men it probably is as well, but it's manifest in a different way. But I would certainly agree that
Undoubtedly. Oh, I've
I would
seen it
agree.
manifested in men a lot. You, I mean, besides the kind of resentfulness of certain very online men towards women, I do also see men who don't really, they're very effeminate in the not in necessarily me in the sense that they are physically weak or they look feminine, but effeminate in the sense that they can't control themselves. They are consumed by, self gratification,
They're
and this
Kumas.
leads to conflict of interest. Because if you are going to be a husband, if you are going to be in a committed relationship with a woman, you that is your priority, and that that is your earthly priority at that stage. That is your worldly priority. Besides God, your wife is your priority, in my
I think
opinion.
I think there's something fundamentally wrong with a woman who is actually okay with her husband masturbating to pornography. I think there's something like, and I think that a lot of women are hurt by this but don't say anything because it's the norm in the culture. I think that doing that is a form of cheating. I
Oh,
think
I
that
mean, I would have. I mean, I was kind of hinting at that, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to actually say that out loud. But now that you said it out loud, yes, I think that's a huge part of why women see men as effeminate.
oh
What
yeah, I
make
mean I
and
don't
that's a huge part of what makes men effeminate is that this is pornography.
I don't think it's even that. I think that a lot of women. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of women are completely oblivious to just how bad the pornography issue is. But I think that the natural effect of pornography is to create an effeminized man.
Oh yes, oh yes. I can't tell you that. I mean, the exact definition of effeminacy is just this inability to control oneself, this weakness that causes them to go for the easy path over the difficult but good path. And I think that's what pornography engenders in people. Anyway, let's try to finish this up.
Yep.
16%, that's 16% of people under age 25 cheat in their relationships every single year. Now that's 16% every year, cumulative. Within 6 years, all of them cheat. And that's
Nonsense. Complete nonsense. Like, this is one of the things that I don't believe, right? He can say, oh, 16% cumulatively. I don't believe that everyone cheats. That's an absurd conclusion to draw.
Do you think I have I'm now I'm not a statistics expert, but I'm somewhat skeptical of how he's using those statistics. 16%. I mean, 16% every year cheat. I mean, if you depending on where he's getting that number, right? Is he saying that now? If he were saying that 16% of people cheat, um, if you is he saying if he were saying that 16% of new couples cheat each year, like people who never cheated before are cheating this year, and this is cumulative, then yes, eventually everybody will cheat. But if he's saying that, people who already cheated on their spouse before are now cheating again, and that's included in the 16%, well, then he just made a statistical error.
I mean, like, to be honest, I struggle to believe this. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if there's a higher rate of cheating. Like, I've heard it said in places that 20% of men and 10% of women cheat. Right? That sounds accurate, and it kind of fits what he's saying here, cumulative. But, like, to believe that literally everyone cheats, first of all, he could never verify that. Second of all, it flies in the face of my common sense. And the fact that he's actually advocating for such nonsense. Like, no, not everyone cheats. There are a lot of cheaters, but like this is something else.
Let's continue.
as compared to 2% per annum in the 1980s. 8 times. And 8.
Wait, if it was 2% per annum in the 1980s, wouldn't that mean that after 50 years everyone would cheat? So that's still under a human lifetime.
Fold increase in infidelity. Cheating had become a default casual sex behavior and is now intimately coupled with excessive drinking. This supernova of infidelity is driven by empowered and financially independent women who no longer tolerate male abuse and bed or no sex in their primary diets. And this abysmal mutual resentment and hypervigilance.
So, like, he's not phrasing it this way, but he's basically blaming female Kumas.
Well, he's saying that you know, before women were just always abused by their husbands and they had to take it. But now, because women have independence, they can go ahead and cheat on their husbands and not have to put up with this abuse anymore. Which is, when I said he was coming at it from the feminist side, I mean it. And feminism, I think, has has played a large role in the kind of paranoia and hypervigilance that he's describing and saying that this is such a problem. Well, buddy, feminism, the ideology that you credit to, the ideology that was for all this independence and stuff, that isn't an ideology that explicitly models male-female relationships as a class struggle at its core.
I mean,
when you have that kind of ideology that's permeating all throughout the culture, of course you're going to get results like this. But sorry, Elliot, go ahead.
Yeah, like, I mean, as well, like, he's basically saying, oh, like, abuse is license to cheat. It's like, well, people are so prone to sin, right? Either in their misinterpretation of the behaviour of their spouse, or in, like, actual abuse that they inflict. You've basically just given license for people to act in the way that you are saying is a social disease, on the basis of, like, you know, this feminist idea. Like, men, they fail. Women, they fail, right? They do things that are horrible sometimes. Sometimes they lose their temper with their spouse. Obviously, like, if they're, like, hitting them, obviously that's something else, right? But they might say something mean. You know, they might insinuate something that the partner interprets as something horrible when it wasn't meant that way. And if you've done that, you've just given them license to cheat. And these things, they happen in relationships. You know, wives get angry with husbands, husbands get angry with wives. And what you've just done there is you've just given license, at least to women, to go cheat if that happens. Are you surprised? Like, you're worried about the way that men view women. But you've just given license for them to behave in that way under certain circumstances. At least that's how I'm reading it.
I mean, yeah, that's one way to put it.
There should be forgiveness, not any of this, like... There should be forgiveness and, like, saying, I'm sorry. Like those words beyond, like, our Father, right? Like, I'm sorry is, like a very, very important word in a relationship, because it gets, you know, it's okay, or I forgive you. You know, not any of this, like, oh, he said something mean to me, so I'm gonna go meet a random guy in a pub after, like, you know, getting blackout drunk. You know, of course, if he means things like, I mean, even if the woman was getting, like, you know, actually beaten, like, she should leave, obviously, but that doesn't give her a license to cheat. That's evil.
These have dire outcomes and consequences. About 1/3 of the people surveyed in the Pew Center studies, 1/3, are lifelong singles. Another 15%, 15%, are between rapid-fire pseudo-relationship. Can you digest these numbers? Half the population, half the adult population in the United States are single for life. The marriage rate is at an all-time low, having declined by 50% since 1990. Birth rates in industrial countries have plummeted. The populations in many nations are aging and declining at dizzying speeds. Since 2016, aloneness is the new normal for the majority of men and women worldwide. So this is a case study of mistrust and distrust between two groups, men and women. But there's similar distrust between political parties. There's similar distrust between the academic world and the population. There's similar distrust between medical doctors and their patients. There's similar distrust between people and science. There's a total distrust of experts and intellectuals. Everyone is suspect. Everyone has ulterior motives. Everyone is on the pay and is a shill.
Because they certainly seem to, a lot of them.
No one trusts anyone about anything anymore. Everyone conducts research, deep research, before going out for coffee with someone. It's a world where everyone has clinically paranoid ideation and persecutory delusions. It's never been this bad. Never, ever been this bad. In each and every one of the dimensions that I described, the mistrust, the entitlement, the magical thinking, the risk aversion, self-sufficiency, spectacle and appearance, the adoration of death, in each and every one of these aspects, splitting, we are in uncharted territory. We have never been here before.
But what has been good? Almost nobody starves to death in the West. We have an ability to travel the world that ancient people would never have dreamed of. We have an insanely large economy. We have, the growth of the faith in Africa. We have, we have all of this.
Christianity is growing in the third world by a large amount.
We have unprecedented access to so many things. I would never have become Catholic if it weren't for the internet. And I never would have had any of these access to, a lot of this access to the fathers, because I simply wouldn't have even known their names to look them up. We live in a profoundly privileged age with a lot of problems.
We do, yes. Here's what I would just say to people on, there are, I think a lot of these doom mongers, they are sort of, quite a few of them are sort of reacting to this kind of, what's his face? Is it Steven Pinker-esque optimist who says, well, our age is doing awesome. We are at the best place in all of human history. Look at all these charts. Numbers go up, number go up, number go up. We are at the best age ever, and therefore we shouldn't do anything to rock the boat. That rubs people. Rubs people on both the left and the right the wrong way, because there are serious issues in our society right now, and there are quite a few, and yet there's this whole group of people who say, well, there's nothing wrong with what we're doing. In fact, we're the best place ever. We are the greatest society. Again, hyperbole, right? The problem on both sides is the hyperbole. But what were you going to say, Elliot?
This guy seriously wants me to believe that everyone cheats. He can't seriously be saying
that. Maybe. I don't know. That's the idea that everybody cheats is. Everybody cheats. Everybody is unfaithful to their spouse. That's a sort of polemic against bourgeois culture that goes all the way back to the Communist Manifesto. You have socialists back then arguing in favor of communal polyamory on the basis that, well, the bourgeois say they support monogamy, but really they already practice our method of wife swapping. So all we're doing is making explicit what is already implicitly in the culture.
To be honest, I really doubt that actually happened.
Well, no, of course not. It's kind of, he was just making it up. A lot of it was just him pulling it out of the ether. But it's a very common polemic amongst people of a more left-wing persuasion.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's more the case now. In fact, I think that's a given. But
oh yeah.
But it's dumb.
You did say that he has a very 20th century view of these things.
Let's continue.
And I am terrified that the confluence of these unprecedented trends is too much for us to bear as a species. We are a young species. We're 300,000 years old. The dinosaurs had survived for well over 140 million years.
Really? As far as we know, the dinosaurs, like, come on, man.
And they had
I mean, the
occupied every
dinosaurs
ecosystem.
were.
Same like us.
Let's pause it here. Okay,
But-
wait. Pause this. Okay. The dinosaurs, as far as we can tell, have never built a civilization at all. They were just animals. That's one thing. Second, the human race is one. If we're talking about civilization building animals, we're talking about a couple of different species, a couple of different species, and a handful of subspecies of creatures that have existed, like he says, for around 300,000, 350,000 years. The dinosaurs were a vast number of relatively distinct and diverse reptilian species that existed over 100 million years. 140? I think it's from 200 million years ago to 65 million years. So that's around 140, 135 million years.
I mean, come on, like the dinosaurs weren't wiped out by social mistrust.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, like, depending on who you ask, they were wiped out by an asteroid or the Ice Age, right? Depending on who you ask.
I mean, he's not. The thing is, he is. I understand what. If I'm going to be charitable here, he's saying that the dinosaurs were around for a long time, and yet humanity is in danger right now. And he thinks right now humanity is in danger of wiping themselves out because of social mistrust. Which, in all honesty, that could happen, considering nuclear weapons, but are we really at the point where? I mean, we are at. I guess we are at the point where
the U.S. president was married to the Russian premier. They had like a falling out. Yeah. I'm gonna cast out.
I mean, there's all kinds of. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are things that we've invented that could wipe out humanity, but I mean, that's the unprecedented thing right now, right? The invention the invention of things like biological chemical weapons, nuclear weapons, things like that. That's what's unprecedented in my opinion. Social mistrust, that's not unprecedented. But nukes, those are unprecedented.
Victor Manol responds, Michael Bay wiped out the dinosaurs. I think that's what he means.
All right, continue.
Let's finish this off.
It seems that we humans are badly designed and badly programmed. They're critical
original sin?
Flaws in our code. And these flaws are now manifesting like never before, amplified by the technologies that we had created. We are lemmings. We are marching off. The edge of a cliff is near, but we close our eyes and we drift into Fantasyland, where everything is fine, everything is dandy, everything is passing, things are going to be okay. Pollyannish Disneyland. But remember,
it will be okay though. Like, you could have 90% of the population live this lifestyle and there would still be children. Things would probably still run. If there was a collapse, you still have a lot of people who are competent. Like, yeah, it will be okay.
The time comes when the gates of Disneyland close and everyone is evicted. Evicted exactly as we had been expelled from the Garden of Eden. And we have been expelled from the Garden of Eden to be cursed with suffering. There is a big suffering coming on. We need to get our act together. We need to get rid of our narcissistic, psychopathic frame of mind, which had now become dominant. Or else.
And that's the video. Final
Yeah,
thoughts,
well,
Poppy?
the most disappointing part about that is where he says, "Oh, we need to get rid of our point of view," and how do we do that, Mr. Genius? Uh, um, crickets, because in all
I
truth,
wouldn't.
he thinks that and I think because the easiest solution is he thinks is a delusion. You know, the solution to pride is humility, but he thinks that the humility that comes from worshiping God is psychopathic delusion or something.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. I don't think it's nice to like say, oh, to sort of go to him like, oh, genius, right? Because I think, I mean, he's. I hope he's acting in good faith, but his whole approach to this whole thing, I can't agree with it. I also don't think the pessimism is justified. I'm reminded of a passage in the Book of Ecclesiastes, which is why I had that as the thumbnail for this stream, where it says, don't something to the extent of, don't look on the former times and think that they are better than the present, because they bloody aren't. I mean, that's obviously that bit is my addition. They aren't.
Mm.
They're bad in different ways. And so to say, oh, we live in the worst time in human history, nonsense. Nonsense. Complete nonsense. Yes, we do live in a better time than the Black Death. I don't know why he would even say no, because you didn't have anyone to turn to. I have people to turn to now. I can go to the church. You can go to the church. You can talk to people. You can go to your synagogue if you're Jewish, right? You can still talk to these people. They still exist. Whereas during the Black Death, I mean, they still existed too, but it was the added issue of half of people or a third of people being killed. What do we do now? We're stuck inside. We have depression. We're unhappy. We are without God, many of us. Sure, the world's going mad. Like, I think the better question is, when has it not gone mad in some way? So, on that note, I think I'm going to bring
Yeah, if I may, one last thing is I want to say something about the whole style that he's presenting this argument in, because he is not. It's difficult. It's difficult for me to talk about. I really didn't like the way he presented it, and in large part, it's because he's presenting it as a narrative rather than a narrative about how bad everything is, a story about how bad everything is, with, there are, and it's very difficult to really see the argument, because he's speaking. There are times where he just speaks in this overly poetic way that makes it difficult to refute it logically, simply because it's this kind of it's not structured as a dialectical argument. It's not structured logically. It's structured almost narratively.
Well, I mean, it is in a way, but I think I think we've just sat here and refuted a lot of it. So, anyway, any final thoughts before I close the stream?
Yes. Well, I do think that I think that a lot of the problems he points to, a lot of the things he hates, are caused by presumably the things he loves. He likes secularism, he likes feminism, and he's very much a liberal. He likes these expert institutions, but a lot of these ideas, institutions that he likes, are the cause of the very problems that he dislikes. And he doesn't really have a he does not have as good a I mean he doesn't go into the reasons why everything is falling apart now, other than vaguely pointing at technology. um he doesn't really get into solutions either. So the whole thing is just disappointing.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks everyone for watching. I'm gonna close the stream now. And we'll see you later. Goodbye.
God bless.